I'm going to read a few passages from my book Swim, pertaining to the four winds and my first trip down the west coast of Vancouver Island with my dog Rusty. Leaving Sontula behind, the old dog and I set sail for open ocean. Approaching sunset, I dropped anchor in the lee of a small island. Its shore was gaunt and craggy, somewhat sinister in appearance. In the morning, I couldn't have asked for better weather. 2 hours after crossing Narwiti Bar, the wind dropped from moderate to light, and eventually we would be calm for an hour. Nightfall wasn't too far off. The current was taking us seaward, away from the last possible hole in the wall anchorage offering any kind of safe haven. When the breeze returned, the light had paled, and we had crossed the demarcation line to the west side of Vancouver Island, the graveyard of the Pacific. To the west, a dull halo appeared around the setting sun. It was soon impoverished by a leaden purple haze bleeding from the horizon. High overhead, angry red cirrus clouds spread their tentacles far and wide, threatening to take command of the sky. Seeping out underneath, a great squall line of purple cloud unfurled, and the sun was lost along with the last vestige of the once charitable afternoon sky. Every event in the sky was accompanied by mounting wind. There was with no weather forecast, the hardening wind was warning enough. All I could do was to continue to go with it and gain as much sea room off the desolate reef-strewn shore as possible. It was time to drop the reef mainsail altogether. In the process, I lost hold of the main halyard, sending it running through its shib at the top of the mast. Luckily, it had stopped short of the bitter end, leaving 6 or 7 feet of rope billowing in the wind. The sea was building. I had to climb the mast now, or there would be no chance of retrieving it. Shimmying 30 feet aloft was perilous enough. Hanging on with one arm while reaching out to catch the swaying rope was downright dangerous. After several attempts, I got it. I hugged the mast, gasping for air. After my heart rate dropped, I slid down the rope in my teeth and belayed it securely. I no sooner got forewinds back on course when the jib burst at the seams, leaving tattered sailcloth flailing uselessly. I left her lying ahull and crawled to the end of the bowsprit, unhanking the sail remnants. The wind really began to blow in earnest. The only option was to forge ahead into the night, running under bare poles at full speed. The rudder chattered unnervingly from its obviously worn iron coupling. There was a series of bone-rattling shudders each time the vessel surfed down the face of a wave. I was scared. There was no old-timer to assure me that it was okay. In the last light, however, I caught a glimpse of good old Rusty staring up at me from below decks. He was nestled into sails stuffed between the mast and the scantlings. He didn't say a thing. His look was enough. He wasn't going to steer and give me a rest. He wasn't going to make coffee. He wasn't going to pass me a handful of food. He wasn't going to do a lick of work in our little ship's service. He was an old dog up to his old tricks. He yawned and dogmatically fell asleep. Sound asleep. I was in for a long, ragged night on the helm. I was propelled into blackness, heartened somehow by Rusty's spare manner. With the onslaught of the storm, the sea rose, seemingly to reach the height of the masthead. Eventually, I realized she was riding beautifully. Half the time I steered, watching aft, viewing a procession of black seas outlined by a frothy glow on each breaking crest. Each time the boat slid off a passing wave into the trough, she relaxed for a second or two. Her momentum was taken up in an uplifting rush of water climbing to the top of the next incoming wave. This force, combined with the powerful buoyancy of Four Winds' stern quarter, lifted us up to where she sat level, while the sea foam crumbled harmlessly underneath. At no time did we ship any water over her deck. The Four Winds, at 30 feet in length, was experiencing the perfect interval of seas, enabling her to surf for appreciable periods at top speed. Steady and composed, the Four Winds proved to be a wonder under bad conditions, just as her designer had stated. My confidence grew, my spirits were even more buoyed at the first hint of daylight. The effort of holding a protracted course through the night had proven to be exhausting work. Hungry and thirsty and kind of cold, I still dared not leave the helm. The breaking dawn blossomed into a glowing mantle of crimson when the low-lying, irrepressible sun broke into a brilliant score of radiance, beset by vast scene of aquamarine and streaming white sea foam, cascading row upon row as far as the eye could see. Perched aboard Four Winds, aided by the rising sun, I was permitted to peer deep through the heart of each approaching wave. I was exhilarated and invigorated in physical renew by the sheer freshness of the air. By my dead reckoning, I estimated we had gathered nearly a dozen miles of sea room throughout the night. I knew that ought to be ample over the general run of Vancouver Island's west coast, but it seemed scanty as I approached Brooks Peninsula and Cape Cook. The peninsula and the cape constitute an immense promontory, a jutting bulwark standing against the open sea. Daybreak found us passing closer than one might plan. Standing between us and the great headland lay a solitary sentinel, Solander Isle, a harsh island of twisted stone, speared up from the depths and battered into contortions by millennia of anamorphic surges. The same seas cradling our boat crashed menacingly upon the lonely pinnacle, pounding its stony face with waves of resolute thunder that erupted skyward again and again in towering, taunting geysers. Upon clearing the cape, the coastline retreats dramatically, once again affording a seafarer some valuable distance from shore. I yearned to make landfall, seeking calm refuge from the constantly wailing wind. Instead, I elected for even more sea room and set my sights on the chart in the cabin below. To prevent a broach during my short escape from the helm, I lashed the tiller slightly to weather and jumped below decks, grabbing a stale loaf of bread, a bag of raisins, a gallon jug of water, and of course the chart, crucial for any hope of landfall. I took an extra 2 seconds to give Rusty a pat on the head and was back in the cockpit in the interview of one wave. I tucked the folded chart behind me and took my first nourishment in nearly 24 hours. All was well until the jug slid out of reach. In reflex, I lurched forward, forgetting that I had pinned the chart between my back and the cockpit combing. The wind snatched the chart into the air, whisking it overboard. I had been far out on a limb, but now I was flying by the seat of my pants. There was no option but to press on. A wan cast of light held momentary watch over the white-capped sea. The sky wore down to a sullen gray. The sea was gray, and an equally gray fog formed over the entire seascape, chilling the air and souring the stomach of an increasingly gray man. The storm-force winds moderated, but still whistled a gale. I rolled out 8 feet of head on the mainsail and scanned the horizon, our lack of such, 360 degrees bound by fog. For a second, something darker loomed on the silver screen, a wisp. Then meagerly again, a slight sight offered seductively through the thinning veil. Land! But what stretch of land might that be? It was low and flat and out of character with the rest of Vancouver Island's rugged, mountainous west coast. Then it dawned on me, Heskwood Harbor, recalling the only thing I could from the lost chart, along with the fact that the entrance was relatively free of treacherous reefs littering the coast. I got a compass heading on the Phantom and changed course. Thank God I had been looking in that direction and had caught that glimpse. Then, nonetheless, it was 2 more hours before Heskwood Light came into view. Though our speed was only 2.5 to 3 knots, we were making progress, and I wasn't about to mess with any more sail at that point. The boat rocked gently, and the light became hypnotic. It lulled me into its lure. 33 hours since my last, dare I say, sleep, I lowered the kedge into the sand.